We're going to go on to a panel discussion now where we talk about new perspectives on financial and integrated reporting and the consequences for the collaboration between internal and external audit. And I'm really pleased to welcome the other members of the panel to join Soledad here. So we have Brigitte de Graaf, who's the chair of the IMA Sustainable Business Management. We have Dick de Waard, who is professor at Groningen University, and I hope I've got that right in my very British pronunciation of the university's name. You can correct me there, Dick. And we've got Martin Dies, who's a strategic advisor on public auditing at the Netherlands Court of Audit, so a colleague of Mark's. And of course, Soledad is remaining with us. So it'd be really good to hear a variety of views here on the perspectives around non-financial and integrated reporting. We're going to go through this. We'll have some polls again, so get ready with your Slido. We'll go over some of the themes that we've already talked about, and we may be able to take some questions at the end of this session as well. So start thinking about what you've heard. Get ready to ask our panel of experts what you might want to know in this area. You also might want to follow up with some one-to-one meeting requests via the forum website if you would like to pursue something in more detail. So I'm going to turn to each of our panelists and ask them to offer some opening thoughts on their own perspective on the broad question of why non-financial information is so important for the public sector. Brigitte, I'm going to start with you first, if I may.
Of course. Thank you so much, Jo. Well, I think why is non-financial information so important for the public sector? I think the reason is because it's all about this non-financial information. I don't think you can see non-financial information separately from the financial part in the end. It's the basis, it forms the basis for where an organization is heading, what it's doing, how resources are being deployed and where it's going. So it's all in strategy, it's in governance, it's in decision making, it's in performance management. So the non-financial information actually forms the basis in the end for the organization. So if we want to get a proper picture of what an organization is doing and whether it's performing well and whether it's achieving the goals it has set for itself or society is requiring for this organization, I think we need to take this broader look and not just think about the financials, but really look at this in an integrated manner.
Thank you. Soledad, can I turn to you for your thoughts, please?
Yes, of course. The public sector has a very specific characteristic. The public and the private sector stakeholders are very broad, as you know. Clients, contractors, employees, political party, environmental groups, international organizations. But from my point of view, the main stakeholders that need to be informed about how we add value and how we use public funds properly are the citizens. So our main stakeholders are the citizens. The better communication of objectives is of greater relevance in the public sector because citizens demand more transparency in management and proper application of proper resource utilization. And non-financial reporting is a solution for this important goal.
Thank you. Dick, if I can move to you next for your views. I think you're on mute.
Sorry for that.
Somebody had to do it, so well done, you've christened it.
Okay, I got this message, stay muted, but public organizations, in my opinion, also have stakeholders, and public organizations also use production factors, we call them capitals, such as financial capital, human capital, natural capital. And these public organizations also have a major impact on society and must, in my opinion, therefore also be accountable for this. And why should this, in contrast to regular companies, only be about the financial side of the matter? And in addition, public organizations have a social mission anyway. So it is by definition that they report on this. And by doing so in an integrated way, in my opinion, their stakeholders can also get an overall picture of the performance of this public organization. So, yes, I think it's important. Yeah.
Thank you. And last but not least, Martin, do you want to add your views on this, please?
Yeah, I was just thinking about which original perspectives I could add to these fruitful starting contributions. But I had for myself, in essence, that that the substantial part of the performance of public organizations is non-financial by nature. Right? So it's about delivering effective and efficient public policies and services, and doing that in a proper, efficient, and also sustainable way. So the performance story of a public entity is non-financial by nature, how it served the public interest and how it dealt with all kinds of dilemmas between, and this is very topical, efficiency and effectiveness, the new public management values on the one hand, and the criteria related to proper behavior on the other hand. And the challenge is then in a report to share with the public about the successes and the failures, both successes and failures in fulfilling this mission, and integrating financial and non-financial dimensions of performance. So because a substantial part of the performance of a public entity is non-financial by nature, that's why non-financial reporting is also very crucial for public entities.
Thank you very much. That's really good to hear your opening thoughts on this question. I'm now going to work around our panelists and ask a number of questions. And I may ask other panelists to chip in and comment on what we hear. I'm going to start with Dick, if I may. There's still some confusion about the definitions. Be really grateful if you could explain the difference between integrated reporting, sustainability reporting, and non-financial reporting. I think sometimes we're guilty of conflating all three, using different ones. So if you could tease out some of the differences for us and where there's overlap, be really helpful for us.
I can try. And in practice, you can see that many terms or definitions are used interchangeably. And also CSR reporting is also used with some regularity. And in fact, it shows a tiny bit of the development of this type of reporting. In the 90s of the last century, attention for the environment came up. And with that, the development of the environmental annual reporting, but this focus on the environment soon developed into a focus on people, planet, and profit. And this gave rise to the broader concept of what we call sustainability. And this is also expanded further to include information about the governance structure regarding sustainability issues and forward-looking information and other forms of non-financial information. So in fact, non-financial information is the comprehensive concept, and sustainability information is a large part of that, and environmental information is part of the sustainability information. So this is about this non-financial reporting. And when we talk about integrated reporting, we are talking about the reporting format. And this can be in a standalone environmental annual report or a standalone sustainability report about people, planet, and profit, or in a standalone impact report, standalone non-financial report, or whatever. All kinds of standalone annual reports, everything in a separate document. But then you can choose to include this non-financial or sustainability information in a separate chapter in the regular annual report. And then we are talking about combined annual reporting. And if the company decides to issue an integrated report based on an integrated vision and an integrated strategy, this annual report will discuss all relevant issues based on an integrated strategy and report on the relevant subjects in a strong coherence. So that is not the content, but it's the form. All information presented in a coherent, integrated way in one document. I hope this is a bit helpful.
That's very helpful. I started to imagine Venn diagrams from my days in maths classrooms many years ago as to how all of these little bubbles fit together, and then the overview. So that's really helpful. And actually, if we talk about non-financial pretty much we're covering everything in there, and then we start to dive down. So very, very helpful.
Yeah.
If I can just ask a quick follow-up, if an organisation goes for that fully combined approach, does that lengthen the time to prepare the reports, or yes?
Yes.
You have to be.
It's more information. It's more complex, so it needs a substantial additional time. Yes.
Yeah. And being somebody who is, as we say in the UK, a bean counter, an accountant by training.
Yes, I know my place.
Oh yeah, that starts to cost more, and that starts to cost more for the audit, and so on and so forth. So you can see those pressures between that transparency and, you know, what we should be telling people, and then, you know, the bottom line where people are looking at, well, how much money is it costing you to do this? So you've got to get that balance, I suspect.
Yes, that's correct. A lot of companies, they put a kind of budget on transparency on reporting, because if you just go on and report everything, and that's very costly. Yes, it is. So it needs a really tight planning and a good format, good thinking. Well, Brigitte will say something about that too. And yeah.
Perfect. Anybody else from the panel want to chip in on this question, or should we move across to Brigitte? I'm not looking for anybody. Nobody. I think you've done us proud there, Dirk, given us the basis that we need to understand. Brigitte, can I come to you and ask, what is the relationship between integrated reporting and integrated thinking, but not just theoretically? How do we see that playing out in practice?
Thank you very much for this question. And I think this is one of the main questions that organizations are struggling with when they start with integrated reporting. Because if you look at the theory, integrated reporting is actually, even though it's bearing the name of integrated reporting, it's actually the outcome of a whole other different kind of process. The report in the end is only the product that you're creating with your integrated thinking that you're doing as an organization. So basically everything you do as an organization should take into account all those different streams of information, all those different kind of capitals, as Dick already mentioned, those human capital, financial capital, natural capital, social capital, all these different kind of strands of information should be combined within the organization, and should be basically, if you would have some kind of perfect integrated thinking world, would always be incorporated in every decision, every action that's being taken by people within the organization. However, of course, that's theory. In practice, it's of course much more complex, because it is very hard to combine all these trends of information. Also because it's not always clear. We're looking at long-term value creation for the organization itself, but also for society, for what the organization is there for, trying to achieve those goals. So integrated thinking is basically something that you want to achieve as an organization. And as I usually see it, is that integrated reporting, it's of course, it's how you report about it. It's how you make yourself accountable for it, how you're being transparent about it. But it's also a tool which can help you to structure this integrated thinking process within your company or within your organization, because it's very hard to know where to start and how to do this. So with integrated reporting, if you are taking this basically as your first step instead of your outcome as the result of your process, you know what kind of information you need, and you can kind of start working backwards. And I've done some research with different companies, and you see that they all approach their integrated reporting, integrated thinking process or journey differently. Some start with just identifying all the major KPIs, what they're going to focus on, and cascade that throughout the whole organizations, and others just focus on one topic first and then try to work from there. But in the end, what you really want to achieve is that when decisions are being made and when you are working on information and identifying metrics, that you do not just have this one look on the financials or this one look on just the green aspect, for example, but that you're really combining this in all the processes and all the decisions that you're making.
Thank you. as you say, complexity, and again, something that we think about when we're auditing, and you almost start out with aspects of the report in mind, because if you don't get the planning right, and so your corporate plan or your corporate strategy, that's got to play into what you want to report and where you're going to report, and that whole thing about what gets measured, gets monitored, yes, gets reported on. It's really hard if somebody brings in something that you've got to report on and you think, well, we've not been measuring that for the past few years. Where do I get the information from?
And that's some of the very practical problems that you'll come across with the integrated reporting, integrated thinking. Also, some people, well, I didn't do this before. I just replaced someone else. I haven't got a clue when you're asking me about this. So really, it is a process that takes time as well to get to integrated thinking. It's not something often companies, and especially in the public sector, I often notice that people are like, well, but we are in the public sector. We are serving society as a whole, basically. So of course, we think in an integrated manner. And in a certain degree, that's true, but it's not necessarily that all this information is therefore also readily available. So becoming more aware of this process, becoming more aware of where the information is coming from and how you are actually combining all these different strands of information, that's the key, I think.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in on this particular question and the sort of integrated reporting, integrated thinking?
I agree on the complexity of getting this information from the organization, because many systems in many companies, the registrational systems are immature. It's not like the ERP, financial and reporting systems. So it's a lot of standalone registrations, documents, and it's very difficult to achieve. To collect the information from the organization, and so I agree with that. It's a journey. It will take some years.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things that springs to mind for me, and I don't know whether others face this in other parts of the public sector in Europe, but is the factor of legacy systems. And the fact that some of our systems are very, very elderly. I mean, if I had to give it a medical context, I say they're on life support because they're so old. Some of the coding is so old, the languages that are used in there. And how do you then go in and make alterations perhaps to those systems to get the information out that you now need for integrated reporting? Just some of the, the hands-on complexity there. You might know that the information is out there somewhere. And the other thing that springs to mind also is, our ministries perhaps working in silos when a process that you want to report on or things you want to report on go right across government or right across your municipality, and handoffs and getting people there to provide that joined up picture, that can be really complicated as well, can't it? And really add to are we double counting, have we forgotten something, all those things when you've got those hands off and those silos. So yeah, want to really try and get our heads around. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to come to Martin now, if I may, and talk to you a bit about opportunities and challenges. So what do you think are the main opportunities and challenges for external auditors when it comes to integrated reporting?
Yes, well, to start with, I think for the external audit world, here's an opportunity to obtain a new sense of purpose. External auditors, they can contribute to and be part of important evolution, revolution, how we want to call that, where sustainability is the core thing, the key issue, the leading concept, and non-financial information obtains equal status at least as the financial information, and it's really a change, a new era where we're entering in. So how to serve the public interest in an even more relevant way. That's what it's all about for the external auditors. I suppose that's also for the internal auditors. External auditors can deliver a AAA contribution, I would say. This not only refers to the quality they are expected to deliver, but also the dimensions of their contribution. They can be, in the first stage, advocates and ambassadors to put it on the agenda of the organizations where they're coming. Also advising, sharing knowledge, suggesting participation in interesting webinars like we have today. They can also focus the attention of their clients to do so, or the public entities they come to. And last but not least, assurance providers. So AAA contribution, really very relevant contribution as well. In all this, they should maintain their independence and professional skepticism, but also work with other actors in the reporting supply chain, including management accountants. Brigitte is representing them today specifically, and also the internal auditors on the European level organized in the ECIIA. Challenges, of course, are then also developing knowledge, skills and methodology. I think in Holland, the Organization of Chartered Accountants has done some progressive work in this area by developing an audit guideline for non-financial information, and also have the international, the English version of that available for everybody. And of course, fulfill the roles in a very professionally sound way, avoiding expectation and performance gaps, which we have seen, unfortunately, sometimes in the financial audit work lately. So that's why I wanted to say there's big opportunities and also quite some challenges around.
Thank you so much. Soledad, if I could come to you, what can we do to make the report more attractive? How can we make sure that people want to dive in there and actually, you know, understand the substance of the report? How do we draw people in?
Yeah, thank you, Jo. I think this is a very important question. There is a need to move toward sexy communication that highlights how companies add value. In addition to technical standards, a key part of the reporting process is how it is communicated. It's possible to make the most of the reporting effort and turn to a valuable information into attractive content. This will help to disseminate it through the channels available for stakeholders dialogue. Focus not only on what to communicate and to whom, but also on how to communicate it. A good example to illustrate this point, there is an annual prize given by Gnoki, we have here the slide, a South Africa organization that awards the best integrating reporting around the world every year. 12 different aspects are judged with different scores, as you can see in the slide. We can see a very important topics such as strategy focus, materiality, comparability. For all these concepts, I would like to highlight three: connectivity of information, the wow factor, and design. This is essential, especially for auditors. The connectivity of the information is related and coherent. And there is the wow effect, how we can attract the reader's attention, make it interesting, and make them want to know more about our company. And I will say that there is the 3 C's must be met for me: concise, comprehensible, and curiosity. 3 C's. If we have these 3 C's in our report, we can say that we have a sexy reporting. So now I will like you to ask this, that maybe it's important for all of us. Is user-generated report or integrated reporting attractive? I think this is an important question that we need to answer, especially in the public sector.
Thank you. I'm going to take back the concept of sexy reporting to the auditors in my organisation. Report writing is one of those things that we always trying to improve. Thank you. We're going to go to a poll now. I'm going to ask the audience about whether they collaborate with their colleagues either in internal or external audit, depending on which side of the fence they sit on integrated reporting. And we'd like you to choose between no communication at all, very little communication on key risks and key issues only, systematic exchanges, audit reports, findings, etc., strong collaboration from the planning phase, or no idea. I have to confess, if I were filling this out, I'd be in the no idea camp at the moment. So everything's moving around at the moment. It's like watching a horse race. Who's coming up on the inside rail? Which result will win? Still moving around. Will it settle? See what we get. So systemic exchanges seems to be out there in front, and that doesn't seem as if that's going to give up first place, which is really interesting to see that there is, that much activity going on. Really good to hear. And then got some real variation there. So yeah, but pretty much up at the top end of what we would want, with that systematic exchanges going on, some strong collaboration, and then coming down to, well, we share key risks, we share key issues. So that's really good to see. Thank you very much, everyone. Perhaps those of us like me who've got no idea can go away and find out a bit more after we finish today. Okay, so going to ask about how internal and external auditors can better cooperate on this subject. Brigitte, if I can start with you on your thoughts on how we can get better cooperation on integrated reporting.
Yes, I think what we always should keep in mind is that what is the hallmark of our profession, that is the trust, and it's the trust that we provide with the information that's given to the organization, to the outside world, and on which the decisions are being based that the organization is making. And I think that with integrated reporting, or with sustainability reporting or non-financial reporting, whatever focus you're taking, but it is so important because there are so many decisions being made on how you're going to measure this. It has taken us such a long time to get to trustworthy financial reporting in the past, and now we're trying to squeeze in a relatively short time frame. We're trying to squeeze in to create trustworthy non-financial reporting, to create trustworthy integrated reporting. And it's not only just that we wanted to be instilling trust. We also wanted to be attractive. We wanted to be sexy reporting. So we really wanted to be something which is captured not in a very broad story, but something which is very clear and concise and focused. And I think that there is such a big role for the internal audit here, because external audit doesn't know where to start, especially with larger organizations, if they don't know about this very trust instilling processes that are underlying basically the information that is provided. So I think that I'm very happy to see already how the systematic exchanges and the strong collaboration is already taking place, because, like I said, with integrated thinking, there is so much where you can start. If you are already focusing on what kind of information do we need for the report, what kind of information is required, and if we can provide and make sure that this information is acquired through trust instilling processes in the organization with proper internal control systems, and we know that at least is in order, we already know that at least the information that is presented is information that we can build further upon. And I think that's a key where we want to start. That it's not necessarily all encompassing, that we don't want to start with all the information. Start with the information that you know for sure is trustworthy, is information you can build further upon. And then slowly on, we can move towards a more reporting or more concise reporting.
Thank you. That's great. Dick, if I come to you next for your views on this.
Yes, well, thank you. Good question. And I am an external auditor. Actually, I've been working for EY, Ernst & Young, for 35 years. And as a partner in the firm, I was responsible for the assurance and engagement for sustainability reports of, for example, Akzo Nobel, ABN AMRO Bank, ING Group, and more, all large stock-listed companies. So a lot of work to do, and it would absolutely not have been possible to do this without major collaboration with the internal audit department of these organizations. And that means throughout the year. This requires continuous coordination of focus areas, the risk analysis, the audit work to be carried out, and especially focused on the registration processes and the quality of internal control in the company, in the organizations. And it requires continuous monitoring of the results and their translation into additional audit work. for the internal auditors and for the external auditors, especially at the end of the year, after the year end, after the balance date. You have only 1.5 months to do the job. That's a really short period, so you need all hands available. So that is a very practical argument. The other argument is that the internal auditors know their organization the best. They know their way, they know the people to ask the questions. So it's really, really relevant. And so for this specific assignment, you actually have to become one team with one goal, and that's the reliability of the sustainability report or the integrated report. So, and in the end, yes, the external auditor has to sign the auditor's report, but it is a combined effort always. Yes, it was really, really important to have a really good relationship with the internal auditors.
Okay, thank you. Martin, if I come to you for your perspectives here.
Yes, well, I think much important things have been emphasized already by Brigitte and Dick in this respect. I also think that when trustworthy information is the challenge, trustworthy information within the organization and externally reported information, yeah, that also reflects that the relationship between external and internal auditors should be based on trust as well. Mutual trust, mutual professional respect, and mutual recognition that they can't do without each other. As Dick has emphasized, effective and efficient external audit is impossible without a sound internal audit function. And internal auditors, it's also important that they realize throughout their work that their work is not only important for the board and for the audit committee, but also as a building block and an important source of information of the work of the external auditor. And if they start working from that respect and that recognition, and I think they can constitute a very good team with a coherent message as well to the board and to the outside parties. So I think they can be a very good team.
Okay, thank you. Soledad, come to you and see what your views are here.
Yeah, I want to answer the question: what is the dream? The dream collaboration between internal and external audits regarding integrating reporting in the public sector. And I want to say that as any project between internal and external audit is about collaboration. It's essential to work together to promote good governance, accountability, and audit in the European public sector, including integrating all sustainability reporting. And in this light, we have always worked in the working group between ECIA and Eurosai, both in the integrated reporting project and in the current project on assurance coordination. One way to achieve a goal of transparency and better communication in the public sector is integrating reporting, and it will be wonderful if internal and external audit would promote this message.
Okay, thank you all. I'm going to throw in a question here of my own, if I may, that follows on from this. So apologies if I throw you off with this, but all the way through, and it might be because of things that we've got on at the moment in UK government, but where in all of this is the role of other assurance providers? How do we draw other assurance providers in and pick up their knowledge as part of this as well? Because, we're two very important sets of assurance providers, but for most, certainly in sort of government perspective, you've got things like inspectorates, regulators, people like that. How do we pull in information that they may have that may help us with integrated reporting, or shouldn't we? Am I on the wrong track here? Seeing some puzzled faces. Does anybody have any views on this, or should I just pretend that I didn't ask that, Dick?
Yeah, well, I think that part of the information in this integrated or non-financial report can be the outcome of inspections from oversight bodies in the governmental sector. So it's not often used that external auditors start a discussion with inspection bodies, or that's a bit no, I've never been there. Let's say it that way. And so I think that the information, the outcome of the inspections, can be part of the non-financial report.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Well, I've thrown everybody off track with this.
No, but I think I agree with Dick, and it's something that you want to see addressed, actually, because if there is an outcome, whether it's positive or negative, I don't know if you can qualify it as that, but you want it to be something to be addressed, because there is a reason why this study has been performed. There's a reason why this outcome was there. So in the end, if you want to have this complete view of the organization, this is probably of relevance, so it needs to be addressed in the end. So it's maybe not necessarily that it's indeed drawn in the process itself, but it is a starting point for what are we going to include in this integrated report.
Okay.
You could also imagine maybe that you include some other non-financial types of expertise in an audit team. That is also an option when it comes to non-financial and issues and integrated reporting. But at the end of the day, there should not be confusion about the ultimate responsibility of providing the assurance. That's up to the external auditor then, for internal purposes for the internal auditor.
That's a very good point. Soledad, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think in the companies we have the assurance mapping, no, and in this case we can see all the other department that collaborate with us in this topic, no. So and connected with the 3 lines model, no, we have the first, the second, and the third. No, and we can all of us collaborate together with a common goal, no. And it's the same with integrated reporting on non-financial information. I think this is one topic more that we can collaborate together.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, isn't it? That actually there's a role there for internal audit with that, that whole integrated assurance approach and thinking about the assurance map and where do the sources of assurance come from. That should start to pull in that extra information. But I really like the idea of, do you need some experts as well to actually join either the internal or the external audit teams to give that view? Many years ago, when I did my accountancy training, I worked in a property focused team, and periodically the chartered surveyors would come in to give their view on the buildings and things like that were part of people's property portfolios. So yeah, bringing in that expertise is really good food for thought there, isn't it? But yeah, that holy grail for internal auditors of integrated assurance, it shows that that integration really starts to play in and have many benefits if you can get there. So thank you. You answered that one very gamely when you weren't expecting it. I'm impressed. The panel is on its toes. So we talked there about cooperation and how important that is, and we started to talk about some of the other assurance providers who may be out there who we may need to feed in. So I'm going to come on to some further questions, if I may, and this one is really for Brigitte and Dick. Regulators, and we've just been talking about inspectorates and regulators. The regulators are imposing sustainability reporting, sustainability standards on companies. But again, we see the public sector lagging behind in these concepts. What do you think the reasons are that we have this situation?
Well, go ahead.
You first.
Well, I think I don't know exactly why we have this situation. I think it's at a certain point when, for example, integrated reporting started, even though it started out as in it's for both public and private sector, it was the private sector who saw the opportunity as in we can do something here. And you might, if you're cynical, you might question certain motives behind it and why they jumped on this train. But it is something that started to develop quite rapidly after that. And there is some feeling as in we can't stay behind. We must continue with this. If we're not jumping on this train now, we are too late. And if we're actually jumping on it now, we are already too late. So in that sense, there is this lot of in the private sector, you saw that lots of companies were just like, well, we want to score on rankings and benchmarks and everything. We need to do this. And a lot of information was already available for bigger companies. if you're in chemical industries, you're already so heavily regulated. This information often already was available, maybe not in the exact form that you were looking for, but it was there, and it was a relatively small step to translate this into an integrated report. For the public sector, I think that has been quite different. It's been something, I don't know what your perspective is on this, Dick, but I think they didn't have this first step on moving forward and wanting to be the first in this.
Yeah, well, I think, in my opinion, I find that a bizarre situation. And what I'm hearing is that the people start to grumble, more or less. I don't understand it. In the Netherlands, the government measures the business community by imposing reporting obligations on large companies and by benchmarking these companies annually in a mandatory transparency benchmark, but it keeps itself out of the game, out of the harm's way. So the central bank in our country puts commercial banks under pressure, but the Ministry of Economic Affairs does not have to give a comparable insight in the impact of their activities. And government organizations can also be really large companies. Think of the Ministry of Defense and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example. Both also have a serious footprint. Why shouldn't they report on that? So it's a bit, I call it bizarre. It's a bit strange.
Maybe although I'm not asked to, sorry for that, Joe, but I can't resist the temptation.
Go for it. This is what we want.
Our former president of the Netherlands Court of Audit, Mrs. Stuiveling, who was chairing the Court of Auditors, but also has done a business study at Erasmus University in Rotterdam. She always said there's a different dynamic in the private sector. In the private sector, I think this is also what Brigitte meant a little bit. There's an innovation pressure. If you don't innovate, you're out. Sooner or later you will be out. In the public sector, this dynamic doesn't hold true in the same way. There is some pressure of the public. Dick referred to the public becoming a bit unsatisfied about public sector staying behind so much. But there's a good reason for public entities to borrow ideas, new concepts from the private sector. And I think in this time, you'd also want, besides that you want to have public entities you can be proud of as citizens. So they should practice what they preach, and they should lead by example rather than lagging behind. I think this is really should be building blocks for a new agenda for public innovation. So I fully agree. It's bizarre. It's no longer acceptable. In fact.
Yes, and what you said about innovation, I think that companies are always looking for their license to operate. It's a matter of legitimacy, and that's less relevant for governmental organizations.
Especially in the short term. But in the long run, I think it's undermining public trust, and it can be a source of discontinuity in that sense.
Soledad, do you want to chip in on this one, or are you happy to leave it to colleagues?
The Netherlands people can. No problem.
I would think there are some really interesting thoughts there, aren't there? We have to face the fact that we have a political overlay that perhaps isn't as heavy on the private sector. I mean, I think about sometimes the situation in the UK, and especially with our press. If you try something new and you fail in the public sector, nobody ever says, oh, somebody tried to put a computer system in Coca-Cola or in Porsche or whoever, and it didn't work out quite right. Not that I'm saying that has happened, just global brand names plucked out of the air. That's not front page news. I mean, even now, probably 30 years on, when computer systems don't go right in the public sector, there was a case with one of our ambulance services in the UK that still gets rolled out by the press. The press has very long memories and it loves something, especially with computers, projects, things like that don't go well in the public sector. And so we're up against those sort of things that perhaps the private sector aren't. And sometimes it's best to let them do the initial lead and perhaps make some of the mistakes in private. I mean, admittedly, if you're a listed company, something like that, you will have to talk about what's happened. But, you know, perhaps it feels safer to let the private sector lead and then we learn from them. I don't know whether there's any thoughts on that.
Well, I do like to chip in on this one because what I saw also with some of the organizations that I studied is that, and they were both either listed or public sector organizations or semi-public sector, is that sometimes they felt like if we are providing an integrated report, if we are providing our information this way, we can also take matters in our own hand. They saw that indeed in the press, whenever something went wrong or whenever there was an issue, it was broadly discussed in the press, and of course this organization never could do anything right, and they saw that the information sometimes shared or sometimes used to write these articles or to present what has happened was just incorrect. So they thought the moment we become much more transparent on what we are doing, we can show what actually happened, and at least we can make sure that the discussion in the public and in the news and in the press is based on the correct information. So they saw it as an opportunity, as in, well, we can take matters in our own hand now. If we are more transparent on what's happening, we can also make sure that there is a pure discussion being held, and it's not just on speculation and unhappiness about our services in general. So they really saw it as an opportunity, and I think that's something that public organizations can sort of change the look on sharing more information.
So we get into that communications and PR space where we can manage the message and go directly to our citizens rather than being mediated through other parts of the media.
Yeah, at the moment you're not transparent about what's actually going on in your organization. I mean, it's definitely not going to be a very solid discussion that's taking place, at least not for the organization. So at least there are opportunities there. Yeah.
Wonder whether there's a mindset thing as well. Certainly, you know, for me as a civil servant, I'm told that I can't talk about what I do. And actually, we've got to get better at thinking there's a lot of stuff actually that we can talk about and that we should talk about, and that, you know, the Official Secrets Act, as we have it in the UK, does not cover what tea bags you might use in the staff canteen. But, you know, you get into that mindset that actually it's safer not to talk about anything. And perhaps we need to move on from that and think much more about what really, you know, should be there. I mean, we have things like publishing schemes and stuff like that, but actually getting that integration and giving that big picture feels as if it might be a better place. Okay, thank you. We'll see whether we manage to move on over the next few years on that and start to take a lead in some places. Soledad, I'm going to come to you if I may. What would you recommend to regulators in terms of standards for reporting sustainability in the public sector?
Yeah, the standards always is a key message, or is a really important topic. There is a lot of qualitative non-financial information, but it's heterogeneous, and there is a little quantitative information. And usually stakeholders find it deficient in terms of comparability and relevance. And for this reason, it's really important to review the available frameworks or standards. As we can expect it, the Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI, or the IIRC, Integrated Reporting Council, stand out. But we can find another options. As we can see in the graph, we will have the slide, Pascal. There are different models depending on the approach. No, and now we are expecting of the European standard at the end of this year. But what about the framework that control all this information? No, because we speak about the standards of reporting information, but the framework that control this information. And in this point, COSO, internal control framework, is gaining more and more weight. Why this relationship between COSO and non-financial reporting or integrated reporting? And you know, it's recommended to have a system of internal control over non-financial information to ensure the quality of such information and to facilitate the monitoring of non-financial risk. And COSO framework is the reference used to advance that sooner or later all the companies will use, and especially for two main reasons. The first, because the COSO definition and internal control framework, as you know for sure, is not limited to financial reporting, and is perfectly applicable to non-financial reporting. And second, because it's familiar for us and for the audit committees. It is the usual framework in companies with internal control system for financial reporting. By taking advantage to experience and knowledge of COSO, the companies does not start from scratch and will save time and resources. Audit committees are usually familiar with COSO, so this framework will help to supervision of internal control over non-financial reporting.
Thank you. That's really fascinating. I don't know whether anybody else on the panel has got any thoughts about what we might do as far as reporting sustainability in the public sector goes.
I think that I have been joining an OECD seminar 2 weeks ago in Paris. And there was also a presentation by the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board, who have been working on both framework and many standards on public sector financial reporting. And they also, inspired and encouraged by the World Bank call, they will take on board now also the area of sustainability reporting. And yeah, as a general principle, which I think it makes sense, they build on private sector standards on the one hand, but add to that and amend when necessary those standards to recognize specific public sector characteristics, as Soledad has also referred to earlier in this webinar. So that's an area, and their governance of these IPSAS standards has been considerably improved over the past few years to ensure that this standard setting is not done in isolation, but is well discussed with all kinds of stakeholders. So I think it's good that they start activity on that, and they will start with a consultation. So that's a good opportunity also for participants in this webinar to raise their voice and give input to this process.
That's really helpful to know, Martin. Thank you very much. We need to watch out for that one coming to us. Okay, thank you. Martin, I'm going to stay with you if I can and ask you about what roles can European organisations such as the ECIIA, EUROSAI play to promote integrated reporting and the role of internal and external auditors? I think you've already started to allude to that you've been involved in some work with the OECD, but if you want to elaborate on other ways that we can do this.
Well, I think aligning in relevant networks is one important dimension of the possible activities. Organizing great webinars like these. Also, when we can meet more physically in the future, some real life seminars could also be nice. So sharing knowledge, sharing information, not only theoretical concepts, but also inspiring practice in other countries. So they have a really important networking function, I guess, in these European organizations. And trying to influence developing practice and developing guidance where possible. I think those are important examples of activity in these areas.
Has anybody else got other ideas that they'd like to chip in on this? How can we help support?
Yeah, maybe I want to share as representative of ECIIA. As you know, EUROSAI and ECIIA are working together to promote good governance, accountability, and audit across the European public sector. As a result of this collaboration, we have working on a common project that finally, in a document that we spoke about before with Mark. The objective of our work was to identify, share, and promote best practices by discovering how different European countries have been taking on board the principle of integrated reporting. And maybe, as you know, and you know perfectly, ECI is focused on sharing information about the benefits that integrated reporting brings, the challenge of adopting it, and also, really important, identify a number of inspiring practices.
Thank you. I wondered if I could pick up here and ask about something that I see that's quite common with the customers for my organisation, which is benchmarking, and whether benchmarking is something that helps move people on and spur people on. We do a lot of work, and we'll talk about it this afternoon, where we look at the opinions that we give at year end to our customer organisations and what common themes and trends we can find there. Need to be careful I don't give too much away, given that it's my boss who's giving the talk this afternoon. I will be in trouble. But one of the, and we share a lot of, what's good practice, where are there opportunities for improvement. But what always comes back from our customers is, where am I in the rankings? Am I good? Am I bad? Am I atrocious? What do I need to do to move up the rankings? And that seems to be a real spur. Do other people see that and think that that can be valuable? I always worried that if everybody's rubbish and you say somebody you're number one, but you're all still rubbish, they hear the number one, but not that you're not very good part, and they go, oh, we're fine, we can rest on our laurels. So I just wondered, is there a role for benchmarking in this?
There is, in our country, there is a benchmark on transparency. So the way companies are reporting, and you see that what you were describing, you see these reactions at companies. Everyone is laughing about benchmarking. Oh yes, benchmarking again. There is always a list where you can be only the first place, but as soon as they are not in the first place, then they get worried. And you can see that management from those large companies are always there at the moment that that they are sharing the prize and who is number one. Everyone wants to know, but when we are doing this benchmark, you meet people from the companies that are really eager to score on the benchmark for everything, and it has a positive and a negative side. The positive side is that companies start thinking about transparency. The negative side is that they are filling their sustainability report based on the benchmark. So the benchmark becomes criteria for reporting, and just with one goal, to become the number one in the list. So it doesn't sound sustainable. It's more or less a kind of gaming then.
I totally agree. But what I did see when I was doing my case study was that a lot of companies gave us one of the main reasons for why they were so heavily involved in integrated reporting, and what really moved their integrated thinking forward was the benchmark, the transparency benchmark. So it is actually a motivator. So I do see a role there, but indeed, as Dick already mentioned, you must be aware, and it must be a good benchmark, as in the criteria must be defined very properly, aligned with what you want to achieve. That if it becomes a rat race on who's going to be on the first place and next year and everything, and if you want to really score good there, you want it to be a proper benchmark, making sure that the motivation that's given out is also in the right place.
I could also add that maybe beside the ranking itself and the list and the ceremony, the party, that the networking function of the bank. You have a group every year competing for who was going to be the winner, and then you have a dialogue about, hey, what is the secret of your success, etc. And that's also very important, the networking function of a benchmark.
Definitely, and lots of companies and lots of organizations are struggling with integrated thinking and how to approach it and what is going to be the next step, because it is in essence it is still a new area to keep on developing it further. Even the best or the highest on the benchmark is not doing it perfectly. So there is this whole new area still being developed, and having these organizations together and thinking about it and trying to be better than the other next year, but and indeed networking on that, creating this platform where best practices can be shared, that's also essential in furthering integrated thinking and reporting in the organizations.
That's really interesting. Soledad, is there any experience of benchmarking in this area in Spain?
Yes, and as I told you, we have this study about the Spanish public sector and private sector, and I think it's really important. And I always use the Inoki awards that I share with you in another slide with all the points, because I think it's really important to know what are these points are more important and less important, no? Because sometimes the companies say, okay, I have this integrated report or non-financial reporting, but how can I improve it? No, what is the point that I can do best, not to try to be better in this position with the benchmark? And I always use this because I think it's important, not to review all these points. Now, I am good in the wow effect or in the image or something like that, and with this you can improve your position in this benchmark.
And there's some really important lessons there, aren't there? Not just for integrated reporting, but sort of using benchmarks in general about, you know, making sure that the criteria are right, but also reviewing those quite regularly to make sure that you're not in stasis, that you're moving on, and also that potential for gaming the system. You know, you think back to, you know, things like the diesel engine scandal a few years back, where, you know, things were being set up to game the system so that you could get the accreditation in certain very set specific circumstances. We need to be careful about that. And, you know, as we've been hearing, this is an evolving area of practice, and we need to be, you know, making sure that evolution does not get stifled, because everybody goes, well, I've met the criteria now, I don't need to worry about going beyond. And it does come back to that talking to each other and comparing, but also I think being brave and being prepared to stand out, because your situation might not be the same as everybody else's. And that can be the hardest thing for humans, can't it? To actually go against the grain and go, actually, that's not right for us. This is what's right, and this is what gives people what they need. And, you know, taking that brave step. And we come back to the conversation we were having a little earlier, where we go, but if you make a mistake on that, will it be held against you for years? So, yeah, some interesting stuff there for us to think about as we go through this. Going to see if we've got any questions from our audience on this, because we've had an awful lot of things that we've been through already. Oh, there's a great one at the top here, and this will exercise our minds. So, how do you collect future information? That is brilliant. And if anybody's got the information on the Euro Millions lottery numbers for the weekend, I'll take it from them.
So, but in my opinion, you don't collect future information. If you are able to collect it, please call me, because in my opinion, and that is what Brigitte told us, it's the future information are the thoughts of the company that are part of the strategy, their vision. So if this is called collecting the information, yes, okay, the answer is read the strategy and the future plans, but and that's it. It's just expectations, and for an auditor, it's rather difficult to add some assurance to that. But we can always look at the quality of the systems behind. But collecting future information, it's part of the strategy, I'm afraid.
And it's about more thinking ahead of, if this is our strategy and this is where we want to be next year, in 3 years, in 5 years, what do we need? So already start working on identifying what is the information that we will need. Not collecting it already, but making sure that you will be able in the future to collect it.
Maybe also you could think about some scenario analysis. If you think forward-looking information, what are possible scenarios? You can't perfectly predict what's going to happen, but you can try to develop some scenarios and what if procedures.
Soledad, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, in integrated reporting, we are speaking about how we add value in the mid and long term, no? And this is maybe we think about the future, but we know how we add value now. in the mid and long term. So maybe we can know more or less this information that we are going to need. So, and this is a process, and we are going to adapt. No, and this is the key concept, that maybe the report, the key indicators are today is not the same that in 5 years, but we are going to analyze it, and we are going to have this new information.
Thank you. I wonder also whether there's a part to play here for sort of the emerging areas of data analytics and artificial intelligence, where you have data there, but it's how do you access it? How do you perhaps combine it, use it in new ways to report on things that may come up in future that you may not have thought about directly, but actually if you can harness these techniques and tools, you may be able to, you know, to mine what you need more easily than you have in the past. And you know, that's something that all us, you know, sort of auditors, accountants, people responsible for reporting, we're exploring, some to a greater degree than others. But you know that, you know, there's possibilities there as well, aren't there? Even if you've not been able to specify exactly what information you might need in that mid or long term. Is it locked away somewhere? Can you combine it to get there? Yeah. But as we say, if you do know the information from the future, let us know. Soledad, there's one come up for you here, talking about verifying the function of internal control, and again coming back to understanding the cooperation between the two. Do you want to pick that one up, and then we'll expand it out to the wider panel?
Yeah, I think internal control and external control are not enemies. I think this is the key concept, no? That internal audit are inside the company, and we, in this case, we are focused on that the company achieve the goals. And in the case of non-financial reporting, we try to help the company with these two roles that we say, no, assurance, no, or help the company in this process. And when the external auditors, in my case, the Supreme Audit Institution or the external auditors arrive to my company to audit, I share with them my reports, my findings, all the things. And the only difference is that I all the time inside the company, and the external auditors arrive in one moment, audit, and after go. No, and this is we need to think that we have more or less the same goals. The difference is I report to the audit committee, and the Supreme Audit Institution report to other. You know, but we share this information. I want that the company achieve the goals. That is, for me, is the most important, and following, of course, the law and the rules and all of this. So my idea is to share all the information, to be transparent. No, we try to be transparent with the non-financial information and the rating reporting, and I think the internal audit, we need to do the same, to be transparent and share our report and our knowledge and the things that we find.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this? I'm seeing lots of nods from the panel.
Well, effective internal auditing, effective external auditing can only be done if the information systems within the organization work well. So they have also a shared, both external and internal audits have a shared focus as well on the quality of the internal information systems. And that's the work of other actors in the reporting supply chain, I would say. So internal auditing has a lot of work to do, of course, in assessing and advising on the quality of the internal information systems. And of course, they have a huge challenge to develop to be able to serve integrated thinking and integrated reporting. There's a lot on the agenda there as well.
Yeah. Something, isn't there, very important about alignment here? Yeah. And making sure that things are aligned, because obviously internal audit has a role to play in a set of standards that it needs to observe, which is around risk-based internal auditing. And so it takes us back to, you know, are benchmarks helpful? Because if benchmarks are a set of set criteria and those criteria do not apply to you, and they're not, you know, don't cover your key risks, you start to get a mismatch, and do internal audit get pulled away because you should be very heavily involved in integrated reporting, when actually, no, you should be worrying about certain key risks. So that alignment, the alignment as we've been talking about from, your planning through your execution to your reporting, but also the alignment of what are the key things on non-financial reporting that are relevant to your objectives and to your risks as an organisation. Then you get that alignment all the way through, and the information and the sharing works really well. So as we've said, it's really complex, and it brings us back to that integrated thinking. And how do we pull all of that together? We're not going to solve this.
No, and of course, the outcome of the work of the internal auditor is relevant for the external auditor, but not all of it, because the internal auditor has a huge internal role to advise and to help their own company. But that's what I said earlier, is it asks for, it needs a lot of communication and cooperation to be sure that we get the right information from internal audit, and it's a matter of trust also, because they have to be transparent to the external auditor, so the external auditor has to be transparent to the internal auditor what he is planning to do with the information he gets from internal audit. So, but it's really relevant information for the external audit too.
In Holland, there's one other crucial actor in the reporting supply chain, and I'm not sure whether in all countries that's equally important, but we call it the controller. The controller is really the first in place, responsible for the architecture and the realization of the internal information system. What should the information system deliver for management purposes, but also for external reporting purposes? And I have the idea in Holland that's a very important and professionalized function with postmaster education, etc. I'm not sure whether in all countries this function is under this name, is in position. I don't know. Quite the same. I'm not sure. I don't know, Brigitte, about from your management accounting perspective.
It differs per country. You do have indeed the controller, or the management accountant, or the finance person, or the finance department. But what you do see quite generally is that when it comes to integrated reporting and this integrated information, that the finance department is a department where it all comes together, as the finance department already knows how to deal with many different types of information. They already know how to connect this and how to create this into, usable information for decision making. So you do see that indeed, whether it is the controller, the management accountant, or the finance people, but quite often the integrated thinking happens in that area mostly. It's really something that's picked up and professionalized in the finance department.
That means that the financial department has to learn a lot about non-financial information. So people say that the chief financial officer, the CFO, should be CPO, the chief performance officer, and that's maybe a little bit.
Or the chief value officer.
The chief value officer, yes, that's also a good one. But you can see that most controllers in the financial department has to go through the same process as auditors. We have to learn about non-financial information. It's new, so a lot to do also there.
And of course, historically speaks to why, for a long time, the chief financial officer was also the chief information officer, because of course, originally the systems came in to get us the finance information that we needed and draw together. And we're background come full circle again about how do you pull together the non-financial information. I wonder as well, we've talked about the fact that finance has a view across the organisation. Both the internal and the external auditors do, but I wonder as well where sort of our risk managers come in, and they have a view, don't they, across the organisation, and bring in a lot of information, albeit we're all looking through slightly different lenses. And I wondered whether there's anything there where we can, bring in information from our risk managers that helps on this, or whether that's a red herring.
I think it is of utmost importance to include the information of risk managers. I think if you're thinking about the major challenges that companies, organizations, society is facing, it has a lot to do with risk management and how you deal with it. So that information should be incorporated in decision making. If you don't do it, it's gonna affect you on the long run. So really long-term value creation and being a sustainable organization and not being here only now, but also being there in 10 years or 15 years, it really means that you incorporate the risk information.
Yes.
And it's another one of those areas, isn't it, where we see many organisations who have risk management, but it almost becomes a standalone subject rather than being integrated. And getting people to integrate risk into their, we know as auditors that getting people to integrate risk into their, you know, we do it in our own daily lives, you know, we're doing it all the time without thinking, aren't we, as human beings? But when you ask people to put that into a work context, you know, some people do it very successfully and some organisations do it very successfully. But I'm sure that if we all had a pound or a euro, pick your own currency, for every time we've gone to an organisation and looked and seen risk management that really just is a tick box exercise rather than having that integrated view and bringing things together, you know, a lot of us would have quite a bit of money in our pockets.
So we should also get rid of the silos within the organization and really bring the people together. That's also a dimension of integration, I think.
Yes.
And I think in the public sector, this topic is having more and more importance with the years. No, now there is a lot of public sector that have this risk department, and sometimes we have in the same department. In my case, I'm the internal audit director and the risk management director, both. No, and we have this global view, no, of the company with the risk and the audits and all of this. And I think the public sector now we are taking a step forward to this topic a lot, and we are implementing this.
Thank you, Soledad. Right, I think we had one more question waiting for us. Oh, and here's a doozy after the pandemic. How do you integrate the supply chain in non-financial reporting? Who wants to start on that one?
You can start to describe what actions you take to get information from your supply chain, or maybe you have to start with a risk analysis. Where do I purchase my goods from? Which countries, which companies, and how is our supply chain build up, and what phases, how many, and so that's this. So I think that companies, and you see it especially at companies like Philips and AkzoNobel, DSM, and those large chemical and electronic industry companies, they know their supply chain and they are trying to look into the chain upstream to see where the goods are coming from, if there is child labor or forced labor or environmental issues. And yes, but this you can start a new webinar about this issue, how to deal with the supply chain, because that is a lot amount of work to do. It's difficult, but it's relevant.
I also think that it's important to define your responsibility as an entity towards your supply chain. How do you see that? How are you interacting with your supply chain? How do you see your responsibility, and how and then base your accountability, your report on that as well?
I mean, has anybody want to share any sort of experience that they've got of having to do this in real life at the moment? No.
I'm just the auditor, so.
Oh, what a brilliant excuse!
Yes.
But it's if you're really thinking about your supply chain, it's also, again, it comes down to your integrated thinking, and it comes down to the way you are making decisions. So you want to make sure that you gather the correct information from your supply chain and indeed do a risk assessment on what are the potential risks, what can be happening, and what do we want, and also what can we do to have an impact on our supply chain, and can we put on restrictions? Can we make different decisions, sort of nudging a little bit within our supply chain, showing what we are standing for? And it are these minor elements actually that can have a big impact. But you, first of all, you must be aware of it, and you indeed need to gather the information. And I think that's also something with, for example, the regulations that are going to be imposed. It is important to keep in mind that it's not just on the major companies, but also in the whole supply chain. Already, companies should keep into mind that they are going to be affected by this as well, just because others need the information from them. So the impact is going to be much bigger than of those regulations than just thought in the first place.
And go to just try to find one of those integrated reports from those large companies on the internet. You can see that they report on their vendor policy. They have a vendor policy, they have their own code of conduct, they want their suppliers to subscribe to code of conduct. And some companies, they do surprise audits. They go to the supplier, just, hello, I'm here and I want to see what you're doing. And based on that, they make a decision whether they go on further with the same supplier or not, or they have to correct or to improve. So the large companies like as I mentioned already, Philips and Axo, and all over Europe, there are these types of companies. They report on that.
Yeah, I want to say that I think the supply chain is really important in the integrated reporting, no? Because we receive the capitals and we transform this capital in a new, no? And the supply chains are really important in this process, no? I work in a water company, and of course this is really important for us, the supply chains. And as you say that we can audit, no, the supply chain is really important, but we need to remember that we are in the public sector, so we need to have a special clause in the public procurement process that we can do it, no? And this is the next step, no? That we audit our company, but we need to have in the contract, in the public procurement, that we can audit this other part, no? That, of course, I think we are starting in the public sector with this, no? We control our content, now we follow with the other stakeholders that we have in our process.
Yeah, it's also you should see that in the purchasing, when you're in a public entity, and when you're purchasing goods and services, you're not only focusing on the lowest price, but also on the quality of the goods and services which are delivered to you in terms of people, planet, profit thinking.
Of course.
And that's a really good point, isn't it? To think about the fact that we then need to work with our commercial and procurement experts. And it's that forward thinking that we've just been talking about when we set up new contracts. Is the right of audit built in? What information are we going to require people to supply to us? And I don't know about you, but very often, certainly in the work that some of my customers have done, they share information out, so it's more downstream than upstream. And we've put in, rights of audit there, what you must tell us, things like that. And very often your procurement specialists, your commercial specialists will want to come and talk to the auditors. The internal audit or external audit may not be doing those audit work. That audit work could be supplier auditors within the organisation, but they want to understand from you because you're the experts, and they will come for advice. And it's a good way of being able to help get that bigger picture in place if we can advise on some of these things. So yeah, another level of experts, subject matter experts, who come into this picture. I know ultimately you take in the whole organisation, but I think there are some key roles, aren't there, around the business where you really need them to understand their role in the integrated picture. Come pretty much towards the end of our time. Is there any last thoughts that have been sparked by today's conversation?
I think in this journey, Brigitte called it a journey, that public entities need what you also said, Joe, courage, and they should try to show themselves as vulnerable, that we are in an early stage, but we should lead by example. And we should practice what we preach, so we should get on board of this journey, and also be talking about foresight. Also be ready for some failure. If you do experiments, if you enter this new area, yeah, then you should be prepared for mistakes. You should be open about that and explain why things went wrong, and especially what you've learned from that. And then maybe you contribute to a climate that blaming and shaming is less important, and learning together is more important.
Very well said. Thank you so much. It has been brilliant to have a panel where we've had the internal audit view, the external audit view, the view from the finance function, and also the academic view. Really, really good to bring all of that together. Lots for us to go away and think about, you know, how we cooperate with each other, the fact that we then need to go out and cooperate with other professionals within our organisations or within the organisations we work with. That constant coming back to value, transparency. What is it that people really want to know about what we do? The fact that there's probably a lot more of a qualitative nature in the public sector, that people do want to know about us than just the quantitative. I mean, everybody wants to know where their taxes go, but actually they want to know more, not just how is the, you know, not just what money has been spent, but how has it been spent, the why, you know, not just the what. Coming back to value, what does value mean? Value is more than just cost. And we're seeing more and more with, as we talked about, you know, activism that we're seeing, certainly the younger generation, much more active. I say that as somebody who is now very much middle-aged, much more active on a number of these issues, and the fact that, yes, we do have to have the courage to catch up with the private sector. So a really, really good session. Thank you very much, all of you, for your participation. I'm hoping that I have teased enough about this afternoon that people want to come back and hear more about how, certainly in the agency that I work for, we've been using artificial intelligence and data analytics to pull together some information around things like benchmarking and things like that. But I hope that the audience has got a really, really good view of integrated reporting, of the great work that's been done between the ECIA and EUROSAI on this, and the fact that we are only partway through the journey, that there's a lot more to come, that we are going to evolve over time. And there's a part that we can all play from our respective positions in helping with that evolution, maybe even a revolution for some countries and some organisations. And isn't it great that we have those sort of roles that allow us to do that and make real changes for our organisations and then for wider society. Thank you to everybody who's listened in. We wouldn't be here if you didn't want to come and hear us talk about these things. We're going to be back at 2 o'clock this afternoon to talk about some of the other challenges that we're facing around new risks, around how we work together on the audit of funds within the European context. So I hope that you can join us then. Thank you so much to all of our speakers this morning. Your expertise has shone through. Really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience and your knowledge with us. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. I think we've already got some ideas about supply chain webinars that we may need to run in future, because as you say, you know, you could do a whole day on everything around that. So thank you so much, and I'll see some of you this afternoon. It's been a brilliant morning.